Welcome to the WRAL Daily Download. I'm Jack Hagel. Governor Roy Cooper recently returned from Japan. He was there to meet with trade officials and executives as part of a long effort to recruit businesses to North Carolina. Days after his return, Toyota said it would spend billions of dollars to bring 3,000 more jobs to the state. WRAL state government reporter Will Doran spoke with Cooper, who shed some light on the confidential discussions that went into wooing Toyota and what these economic development deals mean for his legacy and for the state's future. Will, welcome back.
Thanks.
Well, let's talk about the latest get for North Carolina. What is this Toyota plant, and how does it fit into North Carolina's larger economic picture?
So this is a deal that was really years in the making, and it is a big battery plant. Actually, Governor Cooper told me it's now going to be the biggest battery plant he believes in the world, getting built just outside of Greensboro. It's set to open in 2025, but really these discussions have been going on for years now. They've recently started hiring. There's going to be eventually more than 5,000 jobs there. They're going to be paying close to $80,000 on average. But it's also not free for the state. We're giving Toyota more than $800 million in tax breaks and other incentives. But this is a big kind of theme of Cooper's administration, is luring specifically the clean energy manufacturing industry to North Carolina. We've got this Toyota plant. We've got VinFast, which people may have heard of, a Vietnamese electric car company that's set to open up a factory in Chatham County. Several other examples. We've spent billions of dollars in incentives on luring this new industry to the state.
So what is clean energy manufacturing? Can you define that and tell us what it means more broadly for the North Carolina economy?
Yeah, so it's this kind of burgeoning new industry as, car makers start building more electric vehicles, as utility companies start looking more towards, renewable energy. Somebody's got to make all of this stuff. And there's really not a whole lot of infrastructure in place. And so what the governor told me is that he kind of made this decision several years ago to position North Carolina to be the tip of the spear, basically, as these companies start ramping up, as electric vehicles become more commonplace, as, there's a bigger push for offshore wind and electric boats and, just kind of moving towards more climate-friendly modes of transportation and energy and things like that. And so he thinks that that's going to be a winning proposition for the state for hopefully generations to come.
Now, you mentioned that under Cooper's watch, the state has spent billions on luring these companies. Is there any skepticism around that investment?
Sure. I mean, like anything dealing with climate change, it's going to be polarizing. I spoke with Donald Bryson, who leads the conservative John Locke Foundation in Raleigh. He is against government subsidies in general and also really specifically skeptical of the electric vehicle industry. He pointed me to this recent poll that shows most Americans aren't really interested in buying electric vehicles. They are still pretty expensive. People are concerned about their range. There's some other issues. So he's worried that, we're making this big bet on something that there's not a whole lot of demand for. He also told me that he's worried about the human toll behind all of this stuff. He pointed to human rights violations in China and Africa, where a lot of the minerals that you need to make these batteries get mined. I pointed out, hey, the oil and gas industry has a very similar track record in those same places. And he said, well, to be fair, I don't think the oil and gas industry should be getting government subsidies either. But mostly, he fears that this is just a poor strategic decision for the state that Cooper has made. He believes more for politics than economics, if electric vehicles do kind of fail to take off. But on the other hand, I also spoke to Gerald Cohen. He's the chief economist for the Keenan Institute of Private Enterprise at UNC, and he thinks Cooper is making the right calls. He says the demand for clean energy isn't being driven by politics, it is being driven by the market, and he thinks that this is an industry that is going to keep growing. He's a former Obama administration official, former Wall Street guy. He said he actually agrees with Bryson that incentives are probably not a very good thing, but, everybody does it. He said if every state, could agree to stop doing incentives, everyone would win. But if you want to play this game of getting factories, you have to offer incentives. So he said the bigger question is really just for state officials to figure out, okay, which industry should we focus on with these incentives, or should we just get out of the game entirely and spend these billions of dollars on, bolstering the education system and just kind of, forget about trying to use incentives to lure factories here.
Well, let's take a quick break. When we come back, we'll hear more about what goes into getting these deals done and what they could mean for Cooper's legacy. Stick around. Welcome back to the WRAL Daily Download. We're talking with WRAL state government reporter Will Doran about job creation in North Carolina. Will, these deals can look good for any governor. Job creation is, after all, a bipartisan thing. What does all this mean for Cooper, his legacy and his future? He's only got about a year left in the job.
Yeah, I asked him that exact question, and he kind of dodged it a little bit. I said, when you are working on these deals, are you thinking about your legacy? Are you thinking about kind of your next step once you leave the governor's office? And he said, well, I'm really just focused on the day-to-day. He's still got 14 months left in office, and he told me he's actually got some, more meetings set up. He said that, these economic development things are confidential, so he couldn't give too many details. But, he said he's still just trying to focus on, kind of running through the finish line here and not really thinking about, okay, does this set him up to, go into the industry or something like that after he's done being governor. But I also talked with David McLennan. He's a political scientist at Meredith College in Raleigh. He said, people know Jim Hunt as kind of the education governor. That's his legacy here in North Carolina. And he said it's not far-fetched to think that, in the future, Cooper could be known as sort of the climate governor. It's not just things like this bringing this clean energy industry to North Carolina. It's also things, he signed a big executive order doing basically the Paris Climate Accords, this big climate treaty that Donald Trump had pulled the U.S. out of. Cooper put North Carolina back into that. There's been a few other things as well that he's, kind of policies he's tried to drive as governor. So, maybe that is what he's remembered for. But, there's, like we said, there's still a year or more left in his term.
Now, Cooper's trip to Tokyo last month, that wasn't his first there as governor. In 2017, you report, he took a secret trip. What did he tell you about that?
Yeah, so it sounds like really just kind of this whirlwind time. He was told with less than 24 hours advance notice, hey, the Toyota bosses want to meet with you. He had to actually, run up to D.C. to grab his passport and hop on this plane to Tokyo, go and basically convince them why they should build a car plant in North Carolina. And we had this site in Greensboro that we wanted to pitch for them that, state officials thought could be good for an auto plant. And so he rushes to Tokyo with a few of his top aides, makes this pitch, and he fails. The plant goes to Alabama instead. And, it seems at the time like, this is a big loss for North Carolina. But what he told me is he's actually glad that failed. He said, that was a window that closed, but it was a huge door that opened. Because he said he kept up these discussions with the Toyota folks even after his pitch didn't work. They told him, look, North Carolina just doesn't have the supply chain, the other things in place that we want for a car factory. But we're thinking of really expanding our electric vehicle fleet. This is 2017. Things have really taken off since then. And they said, no one really has the supply chain in the U.S. anywhere for that. So, if North Carolina wants to keep partnering with us, here's your opportunity. Like, this is this new market, this new industry. And Cooper just kind of ran with that, he said. And, fast forward 5-6 years, they've been working, the community college system has been starting new programs to train people. Even some high schools in the Greensboro area have, new classes in place. So there's really kind of been this effort, not just, to get incentives, but to really start training up the workforce here in North Carolina for that.
So once a company decides that it wants to come to North Carolina and try to cut some sort of economic incentives deal, how does that come together? Does the governor call up the Secretary of Commerce and say, hey, let's figure this out? You need to make this happen? Or does he call legislative leaders and make the pitch for state funding? How does that work?
All of the above, yes, and more. The Commerce Department's involved. They were actually, they're involved in these trips that Cooper is taking to Japan to, be in these meetings. Legislative leaders know about it. They're obviously in charge of state funding and, helping get these incentives approved. And then you even need, local governments and private developers. A lot of times when these factories are coming in, it's on, privately owned land or land that's owned through a public-private partnership. And so, you need to get the county involved, you need to get the city involved. There's a whole lot of moving pieces to make these things work. And so, no, it's not just Cooper who gets the credit for this. There's a whole lot of people, both Democrats, Republicans, non-politicians who are part of making these kind of deals happen. And, if they materialize, it's going to be a big boon for the state.
Now, as you report, oftentimes these deals are tied to job creation goals. How often do companies make good on those goals? This is a big sum of money. Governors love to say, hey, we're going to get all of these jobs. Does it always work out exactly as they say it will?
No, of course not. Anything, in the private industry, you're going to, have misses. Maybe the business doesn't end up creating quite as many jobs as it thought it would, or maybe the business just goes out of business entirely and never materializes. There's I mentioned I spoke with Gerald Cohen from UNC. He mentioned, even Warren Buffett only has about a 56% hit rate, and he's the most successful investor ever. So, can't really expect government officials to be better at picking winners than him. But that's a big part of the reason why Toyota has actually been such a huge prize. I mean, it's, it sells more vehicles than any other company in the world, as far as kind of reliability and stability. People think, hey, this is a pretty safe bet for us to be, sinking our money into. Cooper has come under flack for, taking some kind of long shots on some other things. I mentioned the VinFast plant that's going to be, making electric cars in Chatham County once that opens. Recently, its stock has kind of taken a tumble. It has gotten some private investors to kind of come in and, say, hey, we still believe in you. But, there's been a lot of skepticism, of Cooper's critics and also just, other people around the state who say, hey, we threw, it was over $1 billion in incentives to this VinFast plant. And was this really the best idea? We'll see how that pans out. But yeah, you can never expect everything to work out. But obviously on your biggest bets, you want them to work.
Well, we know that you'll be watching how VinFast moves forward and, of course, how Toyota grows in this state. Thanks, Will.
Thank you.
That's WRAL state government reporter Will Doran. For more on his interview with Governor Roy Cooper, visit the NC Capital section of WRAL.com. I'm Jack Hagel. Thanks for joining us, and thanks for listening to the WRAL Daily Download and for making us part of your morning routine. Another great way to get WRAL news is the Morning Briefing newsletter. It's a daily email with Triangle news, events, and headlines to help you get ready for the day. Sign up at WRAL.com/newsletter.